The desert night was broken by a single gunshot. It cracked across the ridge like a whip, sharp and unmistakable, followed by a silence that pressed down on every chest in the platoon. For an instant, the men and women froze where they were crouched in the sand, hearts hammering, breaths caught, trying to determine whether that shot meant life or death for one of their own. Corporal Jessica Warren, call sign Arrow, didn't flinch. She had been the one to pull the trigger. Through the haze of heat still radiating from the baked earth, her scope revealed the figure she had targeted, an insurgent scout slipping too close to their position. The man's body collapsed soundlessly, dust puffing where it hit the ground. Her platoon's forward line was safe, for now. But what stunned the squad wasn't that she had hit her target. It was the distance. Nearly 800 yards, in crosswind, with only seconds to judge. One clean shot, no hesitation. It wasn't luck. It was control, instinct, and precision born from somewhere deeper than routine training. The sergeant muttered, low but audible, "Jesus Christ, who taught you to shoot like that?" Jessica pulled her head back from the scope, her eyes steady, calm. She gave no explanation. Only one man in her life had ever drilled her to make a shot like that, and the memory of him returned with painful clarity. Her old mentor. The one she thought she'd left behind the day she enlisted under her own name, carrying none of his reputation with her. Now, with just one bullet, she had revealed the ghost of his lessons. "Eyes up, people," she snapped, brushing off the weight of their stares. "One scout down means more coming." Her voice had that edge of authority that didn't fit her rank, but in combat, rank bent to survival. The squad shifted, their faith in her growing faster than the desert darkness closing around them. The mission was simple on paper: hold a perimeter around the convoy that had stalled in the valley below. Mechanical failure had left two of their hums vulnerable. The desert was an unforgiving stage, flat and open in daylight, deceptive and shadow-drenched at night. Every dune could hide an enemy rifle, every gust of wind carried the possibility of being cover for approaching footsteps. Lieutenant Ross, the officer in command, was pacing near the broken vehicles, his radio crackling with half-finished orders from battalion. He was young, ambitious, and visibly uncomfortable with the silence that followed Jessica's shot. His pride bristled that a corporal had acted without him calling it. "Corporal Warren," he said sharply, striding toward her position. "Next time you wait for orders." "With respect, sir," she replied, her eyes still on her rifle, "next time you'll be bleeding out in the sand if I wait." The squad's chuckles broke the tension for a moment, though Ross's jaw tightened. He wanted to assert authority, but he couldn't deny the truth: she had saved them. He swallowed his words, redirected his frustration into checking the defensive positions. Jessica returned her focus to her scope, already sweeping the ridges again. She remembered her teacher's words, as vivid as if he were kneeling beside her in the dirt again. "One shot is mercy. One miss is cruelty. Never miss." He had drilled that into her under the Wyoming sky, where the winds were as treacherous as enemy fire. At the time, she hated him for it. Now she realized it was the only reason her squad was still breathing. Minutes stretched into an hour, tension thickening. The moon rose higher, throwing sharp shadows across the valley. Then came the faintest sound, shuffling feet in the sand. Not from one direction, but three. Her pulse quickened. "They're flanking," Jessica whispered into her comm. "Left ridge, 50 meters. Right dune, 75. And front, about 100. Private Morales squinted into the night. "I don't see shit." "How do you?" The crack of her rifle cut him off. One enemy dropped from the ridge. Before his body hit the sand, she'd reloaded and fired again, tagging another in the front. Her third shot missed, the man on the right dune dove just in time. Now there was shouting, foreign voices echoing as the remaining fighters opened fire. Bullets sprayed across the sand, snapping over heads, kicking up dirt. "Contact, contact." Sergeant Daniels barked. The platoon scattered into firing positions, machine guns roaring, M4s spitting bursts of light into the night. Tracers streaked across the dunes like angry comets. The air filled with the smell of gunpowder, sweat, and fear. Jessica stayed low, controlling her breath, finding her rhythm. Each shot was a decision. Each pull of the trigger shifted the balance between life and death. She felt the weight of it, but she didn't hesitate. She had learned not to. The enemy pressed hard, numbers greater than expected. Ross screamed into the radio for backup, but static chewed through the transmission. They were alone, the convoy a beacon of vulnerability, and their circle tightening with every passing second. Daniels crawled beside Jessica, bullets whining past. "I don't know how the hell you're seeing them, but keep calling them out." You're our eyes. She gave a tight nod. It wasn't praise she wanted, it was survival. She marked targets, adjusted for wind, for movement, for the tremor of adrenaline in her own hands. Each kill registered not as triumph but as a grim necessity. She didn't celebrate. She endured. The firefight dragged on, the desert night swallowing time. By the 20th minute, ammunition was running low. Morales swore under his breath, yanking an empty magazine from his rifle. "We're not gonna hold," he gasped. "Yes, we are," Jessica said firmly, shifting her rifle. "But we have to move. Staying pinned means death." Ross overheard, bristling again. "I give the orders here." Another explosion cut him off. An RPG slammed into the sand just beyond the convoy, the blast wave shoving them flat. The hums rocked, one of them catching fire. Chaos screamed through the air. Jessica seized the moment. "On me," she shouted, vaulting up and sprinting toward a closer dune for cover. Half the squad followed instinctively. The rest, including Ross, hesitated. Bullets tore after her, each step a gamble, but she reached the dune, sliding into position. She dropped 2 more enemies before the others caught up, their confidence rising in her wake. Ross finally stumbled over, panting, furious. "You're reckless." "I'm alive," she snapped, "and so are they. So unless you've got a better plan, let me work." For once, he had no answer. The next 30 minutes blurred into a brutal contest of endurance. Every shot mattered. Every decision, when to shoot, when to hold, when to move, was carved into their survival. Jessica felt her body wearing down, but her mind stayed sharp, guided by echoes of her mentor's voice. When the horizon finally brightened with the first faint streaks of dawn, the last of the insurgents retreated, dragging their wounded into the dunes. The gunfire ebbed, leaving ringing silence and the acrid taste of smoke. The squad sat in the sand, shaking, blooded, alive. 3 of their own were down, 2 wounded, 1 dead. Loss hung heavy, but it could have been far worse. They all knew it. Ross stood, his face pale, his uniform scorched from the RPG blast. He looked at Jessica with something between resentment and awe. "You disobeyed orders," he said quietly. "I saved your ass," she replied. Neither spoke after that. The squad looked at her with a new weight in their eyes. Respect, fear, maybe even suspicion. One shot had started it, but the night had cemented it. She wasn't just another recruit. She carried something with her. Something that didn't fit neatly into rank or protocol. As medevac finally thundered in, Jessica slung her rifle, staring across the empty dunes. She thought of her teacher again. His shadow loomed larger than ever, and though she'd never spoken his name here, she knew the others were wondering. Who had made her like this? And what would happen when the army found out? The medevac blades churned the desert air into a storm, whipping sand into every exposed crease of skin. Jessica squinted against the blast, her rifle slung tight across her chest, watching as the wounded were loaded aboard. The soldier they couldn't save lay zipped in a black bag, his body already cooling under the rising sun. Loss settled over the squad like lead, but there was no time for grief. Orders would come soon, and the war didn't pause for mourning. Lieutenant Ross paced with his headset pressed against his ear, voice tight, words clipped as he tried to explain the night's firefight to command. He looked every bit like a man caught between frustration and shame, and Jessica knew exactly why. He hadn't been in control. Not really. She had been. When the halo lifted off, leaving them in the burnt-out valley with half-destroyed vehicles, the silence returned. It wasn't the comfortable silence of survival. It was charged, heavy with the questions everyone wanted to ask but didn't know how. Finally Morales broke it. "Arrow," he said, using her call sign, "how the hell did you even see them out there? I swear, I couldn't make out shit until they were already shooting at us." Jessica was stripping her rifle down, cleaning sand from the bolt with steady hands. "You learn to listen first. Sand shifts different when it's under boots. Air carries differently when it brushes across bodies instead of dunes. If you're paying attention, you'll know where they are before they know where you are." Morales stared at her like she was describing witchcraft. "That ain't army training." She didn't look up. "Doesn't matter what it is. It works." Sergeant Daniel studied her carefully. He was older, scar down his cheek, a man who'd seen enough combat to recognize skill when he saw it. "You had a teacher." The words made her fingers pause just briefly on the rifle. She forced herself to resume. "Everyone has teachers. Not like yours." Jessica said nothing more. She wasn't about to drag his name into this desert. "Not here," not with half the squad barely holding themselves together. Her past was hers alone, and she intended to keep it that way. The day baked them in silence until orders came through. Battalion wanted the convoy moving again, no matter what. The desert routes were lifelines for supply chains, and losing them meant whole operations faltered. Ross relayed the orders, voice stiff. We patch the vehicles, we move out. Command wants us at checkpoint Echo before nightfall. No delays. The squad groaned but got to work. Mechanics fought with twisted metal and burnt-out wiring, sweat dripping down their brows. Jessica lent a hand where she could, but her focus kept returning to the horizon. She had learned long ago that enemies didn't attack once and vanish. They probed, retreated, regrouped. The ones that lived through the night fight would be planning already. By late afternoon, the convoy lurched back to life. Engines coughed, gears protested, but the vehicles rolled forward in a grinding column. The soldiers settled into their seats, rifles ready, eyes scanning the endless desert. The sun sank, bleeding color into the horizon. Jessica rode in the back of the last Humvee, Morales beside her, chewing nervously on a strip of jerky. You think they'll come back? He asked. She watched the dunes roll past, her hand resting on the rifle like it was part of her body. They always come back. Her prediction proved right. It started with a plume of dust on the horizon, faint at first, then sharper as the setting sun caught it. Vehicles, enemy technicals with mounted machine guns, racing to cut them off. Ross barked into the comms, ordering speed, but their convoy was half crippled, nowhere near fast enough. The ambush hit with ruthless precision. Gunfire erupted from both flanks, the technicals fanning out, tracer rounds stitching across the sand. The convoy lurched, tires screaming, as drivers tried to swerve away. One of the lead hums took a direct hit to the engine block, smoke billowing as it skidded to a halt. Soldiers spilled out, diving for cover in the open desert. Jessica's Humvee jolted to a stop, and instinct pulled her out the door before orders came. She dropped to a knee, sighted down her rifle, and fired. One shot cracked across the distance, the gunner on a technical dropping instantly. The vehicle swerved, its driver panicking. Arrow, left side. Daniels shouted, his own weapon rattling bursts into the chaos. She swung, found her target, squeezed. Another clean hit. But there were too many, and their firepower was brutal. Bullets shredded the sand around them, sparks flying off armored plating. Ross tried to rally the squad, yelling commands that were drowned in the roar of engines and gunfire. Jessica ignored him, moving on instinct, on survival. She sprinted to a dune, slid into cover, and started calling out targets, her voice cutting through the comms clearer than his. 2 o'clock, technical moving fast, driver exposed. 7 o'clock, 2 dismounts, RPG incoming. Her calls saved lives. Machine gunners adjusted, riflemen redirected, and enemies fell. But the fight wasn't balanced. Every kill seemed to bring more of them, swarming like the desert itself was spitting them out. An RPG slammed into the sand near Morales' position, throwing him backward. Jessica's heart lurched. She sprinted through open fire, grabbed him by his vest, and dragged him behind the smoking wreck of a Humvee. His leg was shredded, blood pouring. Stay with me, she growled, tearing open her med kit. She cinched a tourniquet, ignoring his screams. You're not dying here. Rounds peppered the Humvee, sparks and shrapnel showering over them. She finished the wrap, shoved his rifle into his hands. Shoot or bleed out, your choice. His terrified eyes locked onto hers, then he nodded, gritting his teeth and firing in shaky bursts. Jessica popped up, sighted, and dropped another gunner. She was running low on ammo now, her magazines lighter, every bullet a precious coin spent too fast. She knew they couldn't hold. Not like this. Daniels crawled to her side, face streaked with dust and sweat. We can't outgun them. We need air support. Ross's voice cracked over the comms, desperate. Command says 30 minutes out. We won't last that long. Jessica scanned the horizon, her brain working faster than fear. They were pinned in the open, but the dunes weren't all flat. She spotted a rise 100 meters ahead, just high enough to give a firing angle over the technicals. I'm moving, she said. Daniels grabbed her arm. That's suicide. Better than waiting here to die. She bolted before he could stop her. Bullets chased her shadow as she sprinted, lungs burning, every stride a gamble with death. She hit the rise, dropped prone, and lined up her scope. Her breathing slowed, the chaos fading to a tunnel of clarity. She picked targets with surgical precision, drivers, gunners, anyone directing the assault. Each pull of the trigger shifted momentum, slowed the enemy's charge. Down below, the squad rallied, emboldened by her cover. Daniels organized suppressive fire, keeping technicals pinned while others dragged the wounded to relative safety. Even Ross, pride stripped away by desperation, fell into line, firing like the rest of them. The tide turned, slowly, painfully. Smoke filled the air, bodies littered the sand. The enemy finally faltered, realizing their losses outweighed their advantage. Engines roared as surviving technicals wheeled away, retreating back into the desert. Jessica didn't lower her rifle until the dust plumes vanished over the horizon. Only then did she allow herself to breathe again. The battlefield was silent except for the groans of the wounded and the crackle of burning metal. Morales was still alive, barely, clutching his leg with white-knuckled hands. 2 more were down, medics scrambling to keep them stable. Ross stumbled over, his uniform ripped, his face streaked with grime. He stared at Jessica, chest heaving. "You're out of line, Warren. Again. You don't give orders. You don't make calls." She stared back at him, her voice cold. "If I hadn't, we'd all be dead. You want to court-martial me? Fine. But at least you'll live long enough to sign the paperwork." Daniels barked a laugh, bitter but real. Morales managed to grin through his pain. Even some of the others chuckled, though the sound was ragged, hollow with exhaustion. Ross said nothing. He turned away, his silence louder than any argument. They set up temporary camp around the smoking wrecks, waiting for reinforcements and air cover to arrive. The desert night fell again, and with it came the quiet weight of survival. Jessica sat apart from the others, her rifle across her knees, her eyes scanning the dark horizon. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her raw, haunted by the faces of those they'd lost. But what gnawed at her more than grief was the question in everyone's eyes. She wasn't just another recruit. She was something else, shaped by someone whose shadow stretched farther than she could outrun. And with every bullet she fired, with every call she made, that shadow grew harder to hide. Daniels approached, settling into the sand beside her. He didn't speak at first. Just sat, his presence steady, grounding. Finally he said, "I served with snipers. Rangers. SEALs. I've seen some of the best. You're not just good. You're trained." "Who was he?" Jessica's jaw tightened. She wanted to lie, to deflect, but Daniels's gaze was steady, not prying, just waiting. "He was nobody," she said quietly. "And everybody. He taught me that one shot changes everything. That you don't get to miss. That when you pull the trigger, you're rewriting the world in an instant." Daniels studied her, then nodded slowly. "Sounds like somebody who knew what the hell he was doing." Jessica didn't answer. She stared into the night, her chest heavy. Her mentor's face floated in her mind, stern and unyielding. She wondered if he'd be proud of what she'd done, or furious that she'd given herself away so easily. The war wasn't done with her. Not by a long shot. And now, she realized, neither was he. Dawn crawled over the desert like a tired soldier. The wreckage of the convoy sat in the sand like blackened scars, twisted metal reflecting the pale light. Reinforcements had arrived just before sunrise, 2 armored transports and a bird overhead that circled lazily, too late to change the outcome of the night. The medics worked in silence, loading the wounded into the transports. Morales gave Jessica a weak salute as they lifted him in, his lips pale, his body trembling from blood loss. She returned it with a sharp nod, but her chest ached watching him go. He had fought hard when he should have been unconscious. That counted for something. Lieutenant Ross filed his report into the comms with the clipped tone of a man who wanted to rewrite history. He emphasized his own orders, his own coordination, never mentioning Jessica's calls by name. The squad noticed. They traded looks, bitter and knowing, but no one spoke. Command didn't want to hear about survival through disobedience. They wanted clean reports with neat lines of authority. Daniels sat in the sand beside Jessica, chewing a stale protein bar like it was the last food on earth. "Command'll make Ross look like a hero for this," he muttered. Jessica was field stripping her rifle again, her movements methodical, as though she could clean away the memory of every bullet she'd fired. "Doesn't matter who they call a hero. We know who bled for it." Daniels gave a grunt that might have been agreement. By mid-morning, the surviving vehicles were loaded, and the squad rolled out. The desert stretched forever, dunes rolling like an ocean frozen in time. Jessica rode in silence, her eyes scanning the horizon, her ears tuned to every sound of the wind. Sleep tugged at her edges, but she refused to close her eyes. She didn't trust the desert. Not anymore. Checkpoint Echo came into view around noon, a forward operating base ringed by blast walls and watchtowers. Dust-covered soldiers waved them through, the gates clanging shut behind. The squad climbed out, shoulders sagging under exhaustion, boots dragging across the gravel. Inside, the base was alive with motion, mechanics shouting over engines, medics rushing stretchers, comms officers yelling into radios. War didn't pause. It just shifted from one firefight to the next. Ross went straight to the command tent, leaving the rest of them to sprawl wherever there was shade. Jessica dropped her gear against a wall, sat with her back to it, and closed her eyes for just a second. But even then, her brain replayed the gunfire, the screams, the sight of Morales bleeding in the sand. Sleep didn't come. When she opened her eyes again, a shadow stood over her. A man, mid-40s, uniform sharp, bearing the insignia of a major. His gaze was steady, calculating. "You're Warren," he said. She pushed herself up, standing straight. "Yes, sir. I've read the reports." His tone was neutral, but his eyes weren't. They were curious. Probing. Funny thing about reports. They don't always match what the survivors say. Jessica said nothing. The major studied her a moment longer, then said, "Get some rest, Corporal. You'll need it." He walked away without another word. The squad gathered that evening in the mess tent, the air thick with the smell of powdered eggs and reheated rations. The chatter around them was loud, full of exaggerated stories and bursts of laughter, but their table was quiet. They weren't in the mood for stories. Morales' empty seat was a reminder. The dead soldier's absence was another. Daniels finally broke the silence. Word spreading. "Other units are talking about what you did out there. 800 yards with crosswind, taking out drivers mid-charge, it doesn't stay secret. You know that, right?" Jessica stabbed her fork into the mush on her tray. "Let them talk." Ross appeared at the edge of the table, tray in hand. The squad fell quiet, tension tightening the air. He sat down stiffly, his posture perfect, his face unreadable. "I spoke with command," he said. "They're impressed with the squad's resilience. We held against superior numbers. That's what matters." "And?" Daniels asked flatly. Ross's jaw clenched. "And they want us ready for redeployment within 48 hours. There's another route under threat." Groans rippled around the table. They hadn't even processed their last fight, and already another mission loomed. Jessica leaned back, her eyes narrowing. "We're running supply protection again?" Ross nodded. "Convoys are lifelines. If they fall, operations collapse. We're moving at dawn 2 days from now." Daniels swore under his breath. Morales would still be in surgery. They'd be down another man. After dinner, Jessica wandered outside, the desert night cool against her skin. She walked the perimeter of the base, her boots crunching softly on gravel. The watchtowers loomed above, soldiers silhouetted against the stars. Her mind drifted back to Wyoming, to the long nights under wide skies where her mentor drilled her until her shoulders ached and her eyes blurred. He never told her why he pushed her so hard. Only that one day, the world would demand it of her. She hadn't believed him then. Now, standing in another desert half a world away, she knew he had been right. She pulled a small notebook from her pocket, its cover worn, pages smudged with dirt and sweat. Inside were diagrams, numbers, notes in her mentor's sharp handwriting. She traced the lines with her finger, hearing his voice in her head. "You don't get to miss, Jessica. You don't get to hesitate. Every shot writes a story. Write it well." The sound of boots on gravel snapped her out of it. She snapped the notebook shut, tucking it away before turning. Daniel stood there, arms crossed. "Couldn't sleep either?" Jessica shook her head. He leaned against the blast wall beside her. "You know Ross is gonna keep trying to bury your name in those reports. Doesn't matter what you do, he'll never give you credit. Pride's a hell of a thing." "I don't need credit," Jessica said. "I need us alive." Daniels chuckled. "Fair enough. But command isn't blind. They'll notice sooner or later." His voice dropped. "And when they do, they'll want to know where it came from." Jessica's stomach twisted. That was the danger. The more she revealed, the more questions would follow. Questions she didn't want to answer. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Vehicles were patched, ammo restocked, maps pored over. Jessica ran the shooting range twice, pushing herself harder than anyone else, drawing quiet stares from other units. Rumors swirled faster now, stories of the corporal with impossible aim, the one who could see enemies in the dark. The morning of redeployment arrived hot and unforgiving. The squad loaded into the convoy again, each of them tense, quiet. Morales wasn't there to crack jokes. His absence was a hole none of them could fill. Ross briefed them on the mission as the engines roared to life. Route Sierra 12. Narrow pass, prone to ambush. We're to escort supply vehicles to Outpost Vela. Intelligence suggests insurgents are active in the area. Jessica studied the map in her lap. A narrow pass meant bottleneck. If the enemy hit them there, escape would be almost impossible. Her gut twisted. Hours into the drive, the landscape shifted from rolling dunes to jagged ridges of rock. The pass loomed ahead, a scar cutting through the earth. The convoy slowed, engines echoing against stone walls. Every soldier tightened their grip on their weapon. The first half of the pass was quiet. Too quiet. Jessica's eyes scanned the ridges above, her senses straining. She felt it before she saw it, the shift in the air, the unnatural stillness. "Stop," she hissed into the comms. "Now." The convoy screeched to a halt. Soldiers looked around, confused. Russ's voice snapped over the line. "Corporal, explain yourself." She raised her rifle, sighting up the ridge. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then a glint of metal caught the sun. "Ambush," she shouted. Gunfire rained down from above, echoing through the pass like thunder. Rocks exploded as bullets sparked off stone. RPGs whooshed overhead, slamming into the lead vehicle, flipping it in a fireball that blocked the way forward. The squad dove for cover, trapped in the narrow cut of earth, nowhere to run. Jessica pressed herself against the rocky wall, firing upward, her shots precise even through the chaos. One gunman toppled from the ridge, then another. She shouted positions into the comms, her voice steady even as the pass became a killing ground. Ross tried to coordinate, but his words drowned in the storm. It was Jessica's calls that cut through, directing fire, marking targets, keeping them from being overrun in the first minutes. The fight was brutal, claustrophobic. Every shot echoed, every scream bounced off the stone walls. Smoke and dust choked the air. Jessica felt her magazine run dry, swapped it without thinking, kept firing. Her body moved on muscle memory, her mind sharp with the clarity her mentor had drilled into her. One shot, one decision. Don't miss. But as the battle dragged on, she knew this wasn't sustainable. They were boxed in, bleeding ammo, and the enemy had the high ground. Her eyes darted to a narrow ledge halfway up the ridge. From there, she could flank, disrupt the ambush. But it meant climbing under fire, exposing herself with no guarantee of survival. Daniels caught her look and shook his head. "Don't even think about it." "We'll die here if I don't," she said flatly. He grabbed her arm. "You're not invincible, Arrow." "Neither are they," she snapped, pulling free. She bolted toward the rock face, bullets sparking at her heels. Fingers clawed at stone, boots scraping as she hauled herself upward. Shouts rose from the ridge as enemies spotted her, their fire focusing. She zigzagged, climbing higher, adrenaline surging. She reached the ledge, rolled into cover, and immediately fired. 3 enemies dropped in rapid succession, their control of the pass slipping. The squad below surged forward, pressing the advantage. Jessica kept moving along the ridge, clearing positions with ruthless precision. Every shot mattered, every kill turning the tide. She was exposed, vulnerable, but she didn't hesitate. By the time the last insurgent broke and fled, the pass was littered with bodies. Smoke curled upward, the air reeking of gunpowder and blood. Jessica stood on the ridge, chest heaving, rifle hot in her hands. She looked down at the squad below, their faces lifted toward her. Not just respect now. Something heavier. Awe. And Ross, standing amid the wreckage, staring at her like she was both his salvation and his undoing. The smoke from the ambush clung to the pass long after the last shot faded. The squad limped through the wreckage, stepping over bodies, coughing against the acrid haze. The convoy was in ruins, 2 vehicles destroyed, another half crippled, supplies scattered like broken promises. Command wouldn't care about the details. They would only see the outcome. They had survived. Barely. Jessica descended the ridge slowly, her muscles burning, her hands raw from gripping stone. The others watched her approach in silence. Not just relief this time. Reverence. She had done what no one else could, climbed into the teeth of the ambush, torn it apart from above, and dragged them all back from the brink. Ross waited at the bottom, his face pale, his eyes locked on her. She could see it written in his expression, resentment wrapped around dependence. She had stolen control of his unit yet again, but she had saved them too, and that truth ate at him. "Warren," he said stiffly, "you're reckless. That stunt could have gotten you killed and left us with no eyes." Jessica met his stare without blinking. Or it could have saved us. Which it did. Daniels barked a laugh, though it held no humor. Sir, we'd all be corpses if she hadn't gone up there. Ross's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He simply turned away, barking orders to salvage what was left of the supplies. They set up a defensive perimeter while waiting for reinforcements, their nerves stretched thin, every shadow on the ridge a reminder of how close death had come. Jessica sat against a half-destroyed Humvee, methodically reloading her magazines, the rhythm steady, grounding. Her mentor's voice whispered in her mind again. The moment you hesitate is the moment you die. Decisions are bullets, Jessica. Make them count. When the relief column finally arrived hours later, the squad was pulled back to Checkpoint Echo with little ceremony. Command wanted debriefs, reports, explanations. The base buzzed with whispers long before they even rolled through the gates. Stories had traveled faster than the convoy. That evening, Jessica found herself summoned to the command tent. The major who had spoken to her days earlier was waiting, his arms folded, eyes sharp. Beside him sat a colonel, gray at the temples, his presence radiating authority. Corporal Warren, the colonel began, his voice calm but heavy. Sit. Jessica sat, posture rigid, hands folded on her knees. We've reviewed the reports from both engagements. Convoy Alpha and Sierra 12. Casualties high, but survival under the circumstances, remarkable. Your name comes up consistently. Jessica said nothing. The colonel leaned forward. Where did you learn to shoot like that? Her pulse quickened. She forced her face blank. Army training, sir. The colonel's lips twitched in something almost like amusement. I've seen army training. It doesn't make ghosts like you. His gaze hardened. So I'll ask again. Who trained you? Jessica's throat tightened. Images of her mentor flashed in her mind, his stern face, his relentless drills, the Wyoming wind howling as he barked corrections. She had sworn she'd never use his name in uniform. With respect, sir, she said carefully, my results are what matter. Not my past. The colonel studied her for a long moment, then leaned back. Fair enough. But command has taken notice. We need soldiers like you. There's a task force forming, one that needs precision shooters. You'll receive orders soon. Jessica's chest tightened. A task force meant exposure. Visibility. The higher she climbed, the harder it would be to keep her secrets buried. Yes, sir, she said evenly. Dismissed, she left the tent and walked back into the night, the stars blazing overhead. Daniels was waiting outside, leaning on a crate, his eyes sharp. What did they want? He asked. Questions, Jessica replied. And? She shook her head. And nothing. Daniels studied her, then said quietly, You're walking a thin line, Arrow. Whatever it is you're hiding, it's catching up to you. Jessica didn't answer. She couldn't. The next morning, orders arrived. The squad was reassigned, temporarily, to support a high-risk operation targeting an insurgent stronghold dug deep into the mountains. Intelligence said the enemy was coordinating attacks on convoys from there. The mission: disrupt, destabilize, eliminate. The base buzzed with tension as gear was packed, weapons checked, nerves steadied. This wasn't a defensive escort. This was an assault. As they loaded into helicopters, Jessica felt a familiar knot in her stomach. She had been trained for moments like this, not by the army, but by the man who had shaped her before she ever wore a uniform. She could almost hear him in the roar of the rotors. Up close or far away, the rules don't change. Don't miss. The mountains rose beneath them, jagged teeth tearing at the sky. The halo banked hard, wind screaming, before dropping them on a rocky plateau under the cover of darkness. The air was thin, cold, the silence oppressive. Ross gave orders in a hushed tone, but eyes kept flicking to Jessica. They all knew who would see them through if things went wrong. They advanced cautiously, boots crunching on gravel, rifles raised. The stronghold loomed ahead, a network of caves and makeshift fortifications. The air stank of smoke and oil. The first shots came without warning. A sentry spotted them, shouting in a language Jessica couldn't understand before his rifle cracked. The squad answered with a storm of fire, dropping him, but the alarm was raised. From the caves, fighters poured out, shouting, firing, rushing to defend their ground. Traces carved the night, ricochets sparking against stone. The squad hit the dirt, returning fire, the mountain exploding into chaos. Jessica took position on a boulder, her rifle steady, her breath controlled. She picked off targets with surgical precision, leaders barking orders, RPG gunners lining up shots, machine gunners pinning her squad. Each kill opened space, shifted momentum. But the enemy was dug in, entrenched. For every fighter she dropped, 2 more emerged from the caves. The air was thick with smoke and screams, the ground slick with blood. Daniels crawled to her side, shouting over the gunfire. "We're getting pinned. We need a way in." Jessica scanned the stronghold, her eyes narrowing. There, a narrow side path, half hidden by rock, leading to a higher vantage over the caves. It was a risk, but from there, she could rain fire directly into the heart of their defenses. She pointed. "There. Cover me." Daniels grabbed her arm. "You'll get cut down. Or I'll open the door for us." Before he could argue, she was moving, sprinting low across the rocky ground, bullets chasing her shadow. She slid behind cover, heart pounding, then climbed, hauling herself up the steep path, fingers raw against stone. At the top, she crawled into position, her rifle sweeping over the battlefield. From here, she had the whole fight in her scope. She slowed her breathing, tuned out the chaos, and started firing. One by one, enemy positions fell silent. Machine guns went quiet, RPGs tumbled unused, commanders collapsed mid-shout. The squad surged forward, seizing the opening, storming the outer defenses. Ross's voice shouted orders, but it was Jessica's precision that carved the path. She was the unseen blade, the ghost in the dark, dismantling the stronghold piece by piece. The fight dragged on into the night, brutal and relentless. The caves were cleared room by room, every corner a threat, every shadow a possible ambush. Jessica stayed on the ridge until her last magazine clicked empty, then descended to join the squad with pistol drawn, her presence silent but commanding. By dawn, the stronghold was theirs. Bodies littered the ground, the caves reeked of blood and cordite, and the squad stood alive amid the ruin. Exhausted. Shaken. But alive. Ross gave the victory report to command, his voice steady, his words clipped. But no one in the squad looked at him when it was over. They looked at Jessica. Later, as the sun rose over the mountains, Jessica sat apart, her rifle across her lap, her body aching with exhaustion. Daniels joined her, his face lined with weariness but his eyes sharp. "You keep this up, Arrow, and you're gonna end up with a target on your back." She frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean Command doesn't like mysteries. And neither does Ross. You keep outshining him, and sooner or later, someone's gonna dig into where you came from. They're gonna find out about your teacher." Jessica's stomach twisted. "Nobody knows his name." Daniels gave her a long look. "Not yet." The wind whistled through the mountains, carrying the smoke of battle with it. Jessica stared into the horizon, her chest heavy with the weight of every decision she had made. Her mentor's voice whispered again. "One shot writes a story. But don't forget, stories spread. And some stories get people killed." The mountain stronghold still smoldered days later when Jessica's squad was pulled back to Echo. The helicopters lifted them away at dawn, rotors pounding, dust and smoke swirling beneath. None of them spoke on the ride. Their bodies were intact, but something in each pair of eyes told the truth. Pieces of them had been left in those caves, buried among the dead. When they landed at base, they were marched straight past the barracks to the command tent. Jessica knew something was wrong the moment she saw the extra guards stationed outside, rifles cradled tight, eyes sharp. Inside, the air was thick with cigar smoke and authority. The colonel who had questioned her before sat at the head of the table, flanked by 2 officers she didn't recognize. Ross gave the after-action report, his voice clipped, his jaw tight. He did not embellish, but he didn't need to. The data was clear. Jessica's marksmanship had carved the path to victory. Her name was in every line, every turning point. When he finished, the colonel leaned back, eyes settling on her. "Corporal Warren. Step forward." Jessica obeyed, posture rigid. "Your actions at Sierra 12 and the mountain stronghold have not gone unnoticed. Command is impressed. Concerned, too, but impressed. We have a mission that requires someone of your particular skill set." Her chest tightened. "Yes, sir." The colonel nodded to one of the unfamiliar officers, who slid a folder across the table. Jessica opened it, scanning the contents. Satellite photos. Coordinates. A valley far to the east, deeper into hostile territory than any convoy ever ventured. The officer spoke, his voice cool. "Insurgent leaders are gathering here. Intelligence suggests a summit, coordinated offensives, weapons transfers, the works. We need confirmation, and if possible, disruption. Your squad will infiltrate, gather intel, and, if opportunity presents, eliminate key figures. Daniels swore under his breath. That's suicide. The colonel ignored him. His eyes never left Jessica. We've assigned a task force. Your squad will lead reconnaissance. We want you on overwatch, Warren. Precision shots only if absolutely necessary. No theatrics. No freelancing. Do you understand? Jessica met his gaze evenly. Understood. But inside, unease gnawed at her. They didn't just want her skill, they wanted her to reveal it further. Each mission was a thread being pulled, unraveling the careful anonymity she had built. Dismissed, the squad stepped out into the fading light. Ross stalked ahead, silent, but Daniels lingered beside Jessica. They're setting you up, he muttered. She frowned. What do you mean? They want to see how far you'll go. They're testing you, Arrow. And Ross? He's just waiting for you to slip. Don't think he didn't notice every man looking at you after the caves. Jessica didn't answer. She couldn't. She spent the night cleaning her rifle, her hands moving on instinct, her mind elsewhere. Her mentor's voice whispered again, sharp as ever. The higher you climb, the colder the air. Don't mistake recognition for safety. The next evening, they deployed. The helicopters dropped them miles from the valley, forcing them to move under cover of darkness, packs heavy, every step deliberate. The mountains loomed around them like silent sentinels, their jagged ridges painted silver by moonlight. For 2 days they trekked, skirting villages, avoiding patrols, rationing water. The closer they came, the thicker the tension grew. Even Daniel's jokes dwindled to silence. On the third night, they reached the ridge overlooking the valley. Jessica lay prone, her rifle steady on its bipod, scope sweeping the camp below. Dozens of fighters moved in patterns, trucks rolling in with crates, tarps covering weapons. A fire pit blazed at the center, where men gathered in heated discussion. She adjusted the scope, zooming in. Her breath caught. The men weren't just insurgents, they were leaders. Hard faces she'd seen on briefings, names connected to countless deaths. This wasn't a summit. This was a war council. She whispered into comms. Target confirmation. Multiple HVTs present. Estimated 50+ fighters in camp. Heavier weapons inbound. Command crackled back. Copy, Sierra team. Maintain position. Do not engage until further orders. The squad settled in, taking turns watching, recording, documenting. Hours bled together, broken only by the rhythm of whispered reports. Jessica's muscles ached, but her eye never wavered from the scope. She felt the weight of the mission pressing on her spine. Then, just before dawn, movement caught her eye. A figure stepped into the firelight, taller than the rest, his presence commanding. The camp hushed as he spoke, his voice carrying even to the ridge. Jessica's stomach turned. She recognized him. Not from army briefings. From before. Her mentor's voice echoed, unbidden. If you ever see him, don't hesitate. His poison. 1 bullet saves 1,000 lives. She froze, her finger hovering near the trigger. It couldn't be coincidence. The man below had once trained with her mentor, years ago, back when lines between soldier and mercenary blurred. She remembered whispers, arguments, warnings she hadn't understood as a teenager. Arrow, Daniels whispered over comms, you seen this? She swallowed. Yeah. Then why aren't you taking the shot? Because I wasn't ordered to. Silence. Then command's voice, sharp and cold, hold fire. Repeat, hold fire. We need confirmation first. Do not engage. Jessica's jaw clenched. Her mentor's voice roared in her skull. Hesitate, and people die. Hours dragged by, the tension unbearable. The leaders argued, gesturing over maps, pointing toward routes that cut straight into convoy lines. Every second they delayed felt like another nail hammered into future coffins. Finally, command gave the word. Sierra team, reposition for extraction. Airstrike inbound in 30 mics. Get out clean. Ross relayed the order, his tone clipped. Pack it up. Move. But as the squad began to withdraw, Jessica lingered, her scope still locked on the man below. She could see his face clearly now, scarred, cruel, eyes burning with zeal. Her mentor had been right. This man wouldn't just kill soldiers. He'd ignite wars. She whispered, barely audible. One shot writes a story. And then she squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked, thunder rolling through the valley. Below, the leader's head snapped back, blood spraying, his body collapsing into the firelight. Chaos erupted instantly, shouts, gunfire, fighters scrambling, weapons raised. Russ spun on her, fury in his eyes. "What the hell did you do?" "Ended the war council," she snapped. "Ended our cover, you mean?" Bullets began to snap past their ridge. Fighters were already firing blindly into the cliffs, mortars being dragged into position. The valley had become a hornet's nest.